This is a story about a woman in her 70s on an ordinary Tuesday in a house that had grown very quiet. She had spent most of her life being careful with money, careful with her time, careful most of all not to want too much. And on this particular afternoon, for no reason she could have named that morning, she decided she was done being careful. This is the story of that afternoon and of the year that followed it. Hello, I'm Eleanor. Before I begin, I should be honest with you. I'm not a real person. I'm the AI narrator for this channel. And the story I'm about to tell isn't anyone's specific biography. It's a story I've composed, drawn from the lives of older women of a particular time. It honors how a generation really lived. Her name in this story is Lois. She lived alone now in the same house she had lived in for more than 40 years. Her husband had been gone 3 years. Her children were grown and scattered. One across the country, one just far enough that visits took planning. They loved her. They texted often. But the phone, the old-fashioned ringing kind, stayed quiet most days. Lois had been raised to save. Her mother had lived through hard years, and she had passed down a simple rule. There is always a rainier day coming, so never spend what you might need. Lois had followed that rule her whole life. She had saved carefully. She had gone without quietly for decades, and it had worked. She was comfortable now, more comfortable than she ever let herself feel. But comfort, she was beginning to notice, is not the same thing as peace. That Tuesday, a travel catalog had come in the mail. She almost put it straight in the recycling. She always did. But something made her open it. Inside were photographs of a coastline she and her husband had talked about seeing years ago, back when they always said someday. They had said someday about a great many things. Someday when the children were grown. Someday when the mortgage was paid. Someday when there was more time. Lois sat at her kitchen table and looked at that coastline for a long while. And she did the arithmetic she had spent a lifetime doing. The arithmetic of whether she could afford it, whether she should, what she might need the money for later. And then a different thought arrived, quietly, the way the important ones do. What if later is already here? What if the rainy day her mother warned her about had already come and gone, and the sun was out now, and she was still holding the umbrella? She got up from the table and walked through her house. She really looked at it, maybe for the first time in years, and she saw how much of it was things she had kept out of obligation. A cabinet of good china used twice a decade. Gifts she'd felt she had to display. Clothes bought on sale because passing up a bargain had felt like a small sin. None of it brought her joy. It just sat there, being kept. But then her eye landed on one small thing. A photograph in a plain frame of a trip she and her husband had taken when they were young and had almost no money at all. They had eaten bread and cheese on a hillside because that was all they could afford, and it was still one of the happiest days of her life. That was when she understood something. It had never been about the money. The happiest thing she owned had cost almost nothing, and the expensive things she'd been so careful about had brought her almost nothing at all. So she decided she would take the trip. She would go and see that coastline by herself if she had to. And the moment she decided, the old voices started up. A woman your age traveling alone, what will people say? What if you fall? What if you get confused in an airport? Wouldn't it be selfish spending that on yourself? Lois knew those voices well. She had listened to them her whole life. They were the voices of what other people might think, of being sensible, being modest, not making a fuss. But she was 74 years old, and it occurred to her, standing in her hallway, that she had spent 7 decades being the person everyone else found easy to be around. She had earned, she thought, the right to be a little harder to predict. She had earned the right to do one thing, simply because she wanted to. She picked up the phone to tell her daughter not to ask permission, she was past that, but to share it. And as it rang, she felt the old nervousness, the worry that her daughter would say what the voices had said. "Mom, is that really wise? Let me talk to your brother." Her daughter answered, a little breathless, in the middle of her own busy day, and Lois said it out loud for the first time. She said she was going to take a trip, alone, to the coast, because she had waited long enough. There was a silence on the line, and then her daughter, her busy, far-away, dutiful daughter, began very quietly to cry, not out of worry, out of something else. And she said the thing Lois had not known she needed to hear. She said, "Mom, I have never once heard you say you were going to do something just for yourself. Go. Please go." And Lois realized, standing in her kitchen with the catalog still open, that her children had not been waiting for her to stay small and safe. They had been waiting all along for her to want something. She booked it that evening. It took her a long time. She was not fast with the computer, and she had to call her son once to help her past a screen that confused her. But she did it. She sat back when it was done, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long while. Not the safety of money in the bank, something better, the particular lightness of a person who has finally stopped waiting. The trip was still weeks away. She might be nervous again by morning, but the deciding was already the thing. She had let go of the umbrella, and the sky, it turned out, was clear. The coast was everything the catalog had promised, and a great deal it hadn't. The air smelled of salt and cold stone. She walked further each day than she'd walked in years. Slowly, but she walked. She ate her supper alone at a little table by a window, and found to her surprise that she was not lonely there. She was simply herself, in a new place at last. One evening, a younger woman traveling on her own struck up a conversation, and they watched the light go down over the water together. 2 strangers, easy in each other's company. Lois had forgotten she could still make a friend at her age. It turned out she could. And when she came home, the house was the same quiet house, but she was not the same woman inside it. She started saying yes to things. A watercolor class she'd have once thought silly. Sunday walks with a neighbor. A standing video call with her granddaughter, who taught her patiently how not to hold the phone upside down. She spent a little more and worried a little less. And she found the money did what money is actually for. The trip didn't add years to her life. No trip can promise that, but it changed entirely the years she had left. She had spent 74 years getting ready to live, and then, with the time she had, she finally did. There is something that women of Lois's generation carried, so many of them for so long. They were raised to be careful, and that carefulness had 9 faces. If you look closely at an afternoon like hers, she let go of saving out of fear. The umbrella held long after the rain had passed. She let go of keeping what brought her no joy, the good china, the gifts on the shelf, when a bread and cheese picnic had been the richest thing she owned. She stopped trading her days for a safety she had already earned, and understood at last that her time was worth more than the number in the account. She stopped putting off the someday that a whole marriage had deferred. She let go of the voices asking what people would think. She stopped waiting for permission and found her children had been waiting on her instead. On the coast, she remembered how to tend to herself, her body, and her spirit, and how to turn away from the quiet and toward connection. And she let her money finally serve her life rather than fence it in. 9 things really, but underneath them all, only one. She stopped living as if she had forever and started living as if today counted, because it does. That is the quiet triumph of a life like hers, not the trip. The moment, often very late, sometimes almost too late, when a woman raised to go without finally lets herself want something and go after it and call that virtue too. She was not the only woman of her generation who learned that on an ordinary afternoon at a kitchen table with a catalog open in front of her. That was today's story. Stories like this one are composed for the channel, drawn from the textures of a generation's life, the kinds of things that really shaped older adults in their time. If this story made you think of someone in your own life, a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, or maybe yourself, we hope you'll reach out to them this week. And if you're someone who could use a regular conversation in your own life, that matters too. Grand Companion pairs older adults with real human companions for weekly conversations. Our companions are real people, not AI. We use AI on this channel to compose stories that honor older generations, but our service is built on real human relationships. Thank you for listening.